As I often point out in these moments, we are pre-meeting, pre-recording, but live on YouTube.
Oh,
The most
hi.
exposing of all of them.
Exactly. No big deal.
Anyway,
So,
thank you for coming along.
yeah, no problem.
How's everything going?
I'm actually multitasking a department meeting while I am doing this. Totally
Uh,
fine. Totally good.
well, and I would say as well, like we're good. We don't have to do anything until Gabriella's here. So like feel free to focus your attention like 99.9% right there, right now.
Okay, I could do that. But she also knows that I'm doing this, and I told her, I said I'll jump out as needed.
Gabrielle, you mean, or someone
Oh,
else?
sorry, no, my
Oh,
the
your
yeah,
department. Gotcha.
yeah.
No problem at all. Well, we're good for now.
Okay. Oh, except I think I accidentally logged myself out of the meeting. That's okay. I'm having a great time today. Just
The world of screens that we are living in right now.
oh well, that's okay.
So Tom,
Um,
our recording is paused, but we are live streaming on YouTube still. I imagine no one visiting us there just yet, but anyway. So thanks for coming along. How's everyone doing?
Doing great. I'd like to take
fine today.
photos of or screen captures. Hold on, I need to turn off my sound, it seems.
Well, we're still waiting on Gabrielle, our presenter.
Okay.
And actually, I think that sound was, I just pulled up the window of the live stream. So
Oh.
I think that was you on my other monitor.
That sounded like me.
That's my Tom impression.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And I checked this recently, but just the cautious person in me wanted to confirm. So the YouTube live stream for the other session is going just fine. So my departing did not impact that that presentation space. And let me go ahead and make you all co-hosts. Should you need to do some stuff there. I said this last night, so I think Tom was there for this, Jen, but the role we have taken is somewhat different this year. We're the AV team this year. Like we're not doing like that is what we're doing.
But
Normally,
so far so good.
no, what's that?
So far so good.
So far so good. Normally we pay a group of individuals a good amount of money to do that. I mean, they also have like speakers and things, but
now we know why we pay them.
You bet.
The check in the mail, Jordan.
Yeah. No speakers? Speaking of, I guess, though probably not the amount that we would have sent our AV team, I guess I do have to check in with Jeff about the processing of the stipend for this year. I mean, that's not a rush.
Just go through Jeff. Just go through Jeff.
Yeah.
And I think everything else is going relatively smoothly. I see that Saturday we have just back-to-back sessions. It's all in one room. That's good.
Yeah.
Makes it easy.
Yep. Keeps it simple. Yeah, and so though we have by the time we've developed a good skill at like getting people in and figuring out how to do breakout rooms, by the time we get to Saturday, it's just gonna be like, hey Susan, what do you want me to do? I'll do it.
Yeah. I have to tell you that we're still getting people joining and often just to be able to attend or watch the on-demand sessions.
Oh, good.
I've got a couple.
That's great. Well, and yeah, and as you know, all of our synchronous sessions will become live on demand sessions over time too. So that will be available as well.
Do you anticipate needing breakout groups, or is that what you're waiting to hear in the setup?
That's what we'll wait to hear once Gabrielle joins us.
Okay.
Yeah,
And-
it's kind of just a fluid thing. We chat with them and see what they have in mind.
Okay.
It gives me an opportunity to take a screen capture where they can pose a little bit so that, it's very hard to capture while a person is talking. Usually the expression on your face just does not look that good.
I mean, I hope that is only when capturing stills and not just what I look like all the time to
No,
other
I
people.
think it looks fine when it's streaming,
Yeah.
but any single slice uh, just doesn't look that good. It's very hard. So I'm taking multiple ones just to make sure I'm not getting people with bad expressions.
A lesson in Gestalt psychology, if there ever was one.
You got it. Oh, Jordan, did you want to have anything at all? You don't have to, but anything at all in the October 10th issue?
Oh, I thought I sent along
You
for
might
the
have.
newsletter. I think that I did. If I didn't, I'd be I'd be happy to send it again.
You may have, and I get so many emails.
Sure.
Let me just see if I have one.
I think it was a
You did.
reply
You did. Oh, that was on the 8th. Let me see.
on the 8th. That's today.
I mean September 8th. So that was for the 10th. Let
Oh,
me
yeah.
see if I have it in here. Let me see. This might be it.
I
No,
think I
that's
sent it
your
in reply
phone.
to the email that went to the leadership.
Yeah, I'm checking.
Gotcha. I see that Gabrielle is in our waiting room, so let me let her right on in. Hey, Gabrielle, how are you?
Hi, am I too early
No, you're
or
great.
late or?
No, you're perfect, right on time. I
Okay.
will say, just as a note, though it is just staff and you joining us here in this meeting right now. Eventually, we'll have a wait list and folks will come on into the meeting room.
Okay.
But we are currently live streaming on YouTube. To my knowledge, no visitors there yet, but there may be during the session.
Okay.
It's so for the record, this is the space where I don't say anything I wouldn't want broadcasted to a very wide audience.
Okay.
So welcome. I've got with us here, I've got Jen Flynn and Tom
Right.
Pusateri, representatives of STP, and Jen on the conference staff as well. And do
Hi.
you go by Gabrielle or do you go by something else?
Gabrielle is fine. Gabby is also fine.
Okay, cool.
Either one works.
All right. So
I want to take a quick screen capture if I can.
oh, Tom's going to take a screen capture.
Yeah, so give you a 3, 2, 1, and then I'll take the capture. 3, 2, 1. Thank you.
Okay.
Keeping track of us. So some things of note, now is the time that we can have a conversation about the ways in which, Gabrielle, we can assist with how you wish to execute
Okay.
your presentation. I will say of note for this session, which is different than some of our other ones this week, there is a session that began immediately before yours and will end sort of right at the moment that that yours will begin. They're in a different Zoom room, but I say this to point out that there will probably be some individuals who are attending that one and will filter in, 1, 2, 3 minutes after the start. And,
Okay.
and by all means, feel free to go ahead and start when the time comes. But just to let you
Okay.
know, if a lot more people pop up all at once, that's the reason.
Okay.
And I'll say as well that so myself and Jen, we're happy to assist with, the formation of things like breakout rooms, facilitating chat or Q&A or other things like that. So we really just want to take a minute to check in with you to say, what kinds of things would you like our assistance with while you're engaging in the presentation?
I designed it to be really mostly interactive, so I'm not giving like a lecture or anything. So
Okay.
I will be posing several questions, and so I guess help with monitoring the chat,
Okay.
and seeing what types of things people are saying, because most of it is more so inquisitive than just as you know from my submission, more so like working through some of these things instead of me telling everyone how to navigate it.
That sounds good. So do you, so folks will be doing things like putting things into the chat. Do you want to sort of you turn to us to say, hey, Jordan or Jen, what's in the chat? Or do you want us to just verbalize the stuff we see? How would you like it to go?
You can verbalize the things that you see. That will be fine with me.
Okay, that sounds good. Jen, what do you think about taking the lead on chat moderation?
I can do chat moderation. Yep.
Terrific. I'll be keeping an eye on things like the participant list and the wait list and things like that.
Okay.
As they say, everything in moderation. Jen is going to be everything in moderation today.
There you go.
Okay, cool. So let me also make Gabrielle the co-host of this meeting. So Gabrielle, I've done that for you now. I just want to make sure that everything that you sort of see as your capabilities at the bottom of the screen, is that everything that you would want to do? Things like sharing screens. If you want breakout rooms, like I'm happy to facilitate that. Or if you prefer, I can make you host and you could facilitate that. Do you have a preference or?
No, I don't have a preference. I don't think I'm going to do breakout rooms.
Okay.
Just going to have like
There we go.
a wide conversation with everyone.
All right. I'm just going to send a note to those in the waiting room. We got a couple of people waiting in the wings. Right. Yep, slides look good. Projecting just fine. And I will say as well, right after we begin, I'll record the session. We're hanging on to these and they'll be available after the conference. Not recording now, but we will have that available.
Okay. You said you can see it because I can no longer see my screen.
Yes, I can see it.
Okay.
Yep. Jen, you can also see the slides, yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I'm seeing them too. I'm not certain why you're unable to see them.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I can't see them in Zoom. I could see them on my computer, but now I just see faces. So I just wanted to make sure.
Yep. We're good. Anything else that you'd like to check in on before? I mean, we still got a couple of minutes, but anything else coming to your mind?
Nope. I guess we'll just rock and roll and see
All
how
right.
it goes.
That's
Do you want me to bring up questions and comments as they pop up in the chat, or do you want me to wait until a little bit after you've gotten to a certain point?
I should cue it multiple times in my presentation. So
okay, so I will wait for your cue.
Okay.
I'm good with that. And if I'm not doing it right, Jordan can just write me a message in the chat like, what are you doing? Fix it.
We need your questions.
No, I'm sure it'll be fine. It's only 30 minutes anyway. So if it's not, it'll be over soon.
We'll all live to tell about it. No, I mean, it is true. As I've been working with a lot of faculty members, some of whom, not all, but some of whom are teaching on Zoom and things like that. And I think the dynamic of like, when do you ask questions? When should I speak up? That though it's often a question that people have in the classroom, it's especially prominent in Zoom. You know, like it's a different way of talking and interacting. So. Got a couple of folks in the waiting room.
Mhm.
And I think we're probably going to get a lot of folks that transition from our other session to this one. And last I had checked on, you know, we had a good chunk of individuals there. So I won't be surprised if our numbers go up by a dozen, a couple dozen.
I'm hoping we can track how many are doing on-demand sessions, and I don't know if there's a way of knowing how many have participated in live sessions every day, but
I,
it's a
I've,
good number.
I've been noting it myself, just sort of writing it, you know, on my little schedule thing. With the on-demand sessions, I mean, folks are viewing those on YouTube, so we can just look at the views and use that as an indicator. All right. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, some of the individuals who are in the waiting room are also folks that were in the previous session before I vacated. Like I think Amy Ort and Shlomet there. So either Q&A has ended over there or they were done. They were out of there.
I just opened up the YouTube and I'm the only one watching, so.
Okay. I have it open on my screen. Like I'm not watching like live or it's like paused, but. All right. So Gabrielle, what do you think about opening up the floodgates? I can say a few words and just welcome you. Sound good?
Sounds good.
All righty. Righty, folks. Welcome. I'm seeing, if my memory serves me, some folks that were in our previous session now joining us here. I hope our previous session went well. I missed the second 2/3, so you all will have to fill me in some other time. But that said, I'm so pleased to welcome Gabrielle Smith, who's going to be talking to us about teaching while Black, negotiating identity in the classroom. I'll hand it over to her in just a moment. I'm going to begin our recording and let her introduce and provide any sort of frameworks for thinking about how she will go through the presentation. So Gabrielle, take it away.
All right. So as was stated, I'm Gabrielle Smith, and I will be leading you through this conversation today, along with my dog. And it will be a conversation, so feel free to engage in the chat or engage with me through talking while we go through this conversation. And so we've all seen this or used this in class, right? We've all done something like this where we pose the question, who are you? And if you would take a moment and just drop some items in the chat, what jumps into your mind when you think about this? Have your students do it. Now the shoe is on the other foot. What types of things did we come up with?
So Gabrielle, do you want me to
Oh,
share
yes,
with you some of these?
yes, if you could, because I can't see the chat.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it took me a second there. So we've got a lot of different things. We've got white, female, middle-aged, athletic, curious. We've got another curious. We've got disabled. We've got I am a first-generation American.
Mhm.
Interested in solving problems for fun. White, a teacher, a man, a mostly former athlete, a hard worker. Latinx, weird, friendly, mom, white, professor, runner, a Morlock. That's a new one for me.
Me too. Yeah, so a lot of different ways to answer. And you guys captured a lot of them, different things that we say. But when we talk about these things and we have these questions about who we are, we can answer in relation to our professional or occupational role, but sometimes we really don't think about our professional identity deeper than I'm a professor, right? And so if you were to take a moment to think a little bit deeper about what it means to be a professor, an academic, a researcher, how would you define your personal or your professional identity? What encapsulates that? Who are
Yeah,
you?
teacher, educator, scientist,
Mhm.
early career,
Okay.
mentor, guide, questioner,
Mhm.
always learning, inclusive, supportive, scholar. Can I
Okay.
add stressed out professor? That would be what I would type in.
Yeah,
Helping
some
people
modifiers, right?
helping people to become more interesting, critical, and dangerous thinkers.
Mhm.
And developmental psychologist. Yay, Julie Hill, I am too. An educator.
Okay. Yeah. So a lot of what you mentioned were like the actions that you do and the services that you provide to your students, and then a little bit of how you feel with being a professor. But we're really not engaging how our other social identities, and so if you take an intersectional lens, modify our experience as a professional, right? But that's not something we're actively thinking about. How do the other social identities, the things that you mentioned earlier, impact how you engage in the professoriate, right? And so I didn't really give a really good introduction of myself, and that was purposeful. You know almost nothing about me besides my name and the title of my presentation and what you see besides Brian Poole, because we know each other. And I definitely did call you out. So drop in the chat, what do you think about me just from this brief amount of time, 5 slides that you spent with me? And Brian, you cannot answer.
Enthusiastic, energetic, friendly. Whoa, wow, that's going fast. Engaging, smiley. I can't read this fast. Gregarious, confident, black, fun. You're energetic. You're outgoing, fun, thoughtful, thought-provoking. You're American, well-spoken, critical thinker, engaging. My former student. Apparently,
Multiple people.
yeah, multiple people. Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. So thinking about those things that you just said, what parts of my identity influence these? So I didn't tell you that I was Black, right? You can see my smile, so you see that I'm probably, my default face is the smile. Can't help it. Always been that way. But when you think about how I may be engaging in the classroom, what parts of my identity do you think students first notice when they walk into the classroom with me for the first time?
While they're still thinking of what students notice, you have somebody who is saying fellow purple lover. So there you go.
Yes.
All right, for the other answers, Black young female, first impressions, Black woman, young female, Black, energetic, enthusiastic, race, then gender, then age, according to RT literature. Yeah. Yeah, mostly people saying young Black female, race and ethnicity and gender, and possibly also age.
Yeah. Yeah, and so when we think about these things, these different parts of who makes me what makes me who I am, the physical, the first things that you notice, I smile a lot. You can't really see on camera, but I'm 6'1", I promise.
Got a roll
But
tide in
really-
there now from your pictures.
yeah.
Roll
But
Tide.
really thinking about, all of these different aspects of myself. And when we think about identity, that really understanding that collective aspect of how we recognize or know who we are, and the behaviors or personal characteristics that are recognizable from outsiders to really help define or color how they think about you. And so I am Dr. Gabrielle Smith, currently on the tenure track at Texas Women's University. Just submitted my packet last month, fingers crossed. All right, a Texas native and a self-proclaimed regionalist, born in the South, raised in the South, educated in the South. A comic book lover. All of my students, after they spend a semester with me, know that I am a big Marvel person, but I do also love Batman. So sometimes I dabble in DC. Spelman grad, UA, Roll Tide, right? And I'm actually 4'10". I'm not 6'1". I did lie a little bit to you guys. But when we think about these things and how all of these parts of me influence how I am acknowledged in the classroom and what informs my teaching in the classroom, and really thinking about how these multiple identities that I hold intersect and contribute to how I navigate the classroom, right? And so even thinking about my student population, being at Texas Women's University, which is a Hispanic serving institution, and has a high population of first generation college students, and students who are a lot of older students and fit into a lot of non-traditional categories, how my experiences and how they read me influences how we interact in the classroom. And so a question for you, what personal information do you share with your students about you?
Marital status is one of the answers. No kids, 2 cats. All sorts of things from my background, including my run-in with the Secret Service in the 1970s. I want to know more about that.
We need to have a conversation about that later, right?
First generation American. Oh, whoops. First generation American Latina, first generation college student. In addition to my career background, I share that I am married and a mom of 2 young kids. I'm sorry, I'm not reading everyone's name with these. I'm trying to just
Oh no, you're fine.
get the information to you. My kids, that I'm introverted, that I had social anxiety, bits about my family, pics of my kids, running, spouse, going to mass, married. I'm open to sharing lots. Our identities are important to understanding who we are, who I am, and who they are. 2 adult kids and a proud nerd. And I share my disability sometimes, primarily online. Or do you teach all online, Chris? I can't remember. From Indiana. I generally share very little because I fit so poorly with the cultural expectations of the area.
Okay.
Love of travel, love of comic books and collecting coins, depends on the class. Lots of family stories and developmental psych. I will say I do that too in my developmental psych class. They know all about my nephews. Kids, Southerner, queer, white lady, cat lover, random stories about relatives, marital status, city I live, college I attended, career history. There's a lot more. I don't know. Tell me to stop if you want me to stop.
No, that's fine. We're good there. But a lot of different information, and some of you dropped into the chat because you probably scooped my presentation. But really thinking about it, depending on the class, depending on the area, depending on who you're interacting with, and really trying to build some type of community or engage in some like in-group type of engagement with your students so that they know, hey, I'm a person too, right? So really purposeful types of sharing. And so, but often when we're talking about like social identity and when we're teaching about it, depending on the class that we're talking about, we really often engage our students to do this type of sharing, either with each other or in our classroom or with the material. But when we think about these things like the social identity wheel, have we thought about it in relation to how students perceive us? So when we think about these things that are in the wheel, what part of your identity do you think students first notice about you? So we talked about me, and you said what you think students notice about me when they first interact. But what about yourself? And thinking about what you're comfortable sharing with your students and what you're not so comfortable sharing, and why are you comfortable or not in sharing those things. And so this really leads us to this question of who I am or who you are to your students. And so this answer really, really depends on what you think your students are perceiving about you, what the communications you're getting from society as well as from the field, and what you think your professional identity should be and what's professional or not to share with your students. So when we're thinking about these and how salient they are, most of the time when we're having these conversations about identity, we're talking about identity for our students, but not really engaging our own personal identity. And so we know about identity and how central it is to the field of psychology, but how much are we really engaging with it for ourselves? So how much do you think we should think about this for ourselves? How actively should we be engaging in that conversation or that identity reflection for ourselves as professors in relation to teaching our students? What do you think? Drop it in the chat.
Lindsay says constantly.
Constantly, okay. Good answer, Lindsay. So when we're, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, sorry, people are typing in. For my university, because we have a greater diversity of students, and I need to think, I know for me, about not only my perspective, but their perspective, because I want to make sure I'm not coming at it from one point of view. Okay, other answers are, if we're in the majority, we might not think about it as much as we should. Yeah, I agree. Who we are influences how we teach or how we're perceived. Should be constantly, but often isn't. Agreed. As much as you're comfortable, which for me is a lot, but I'm a tenured extrovert, also fair. Agree with Lindsay, helps model how to have these discussions with our students. Shared identity is a great way to connect with underrepresented students. Oh, lots was at the end of that answer, or beginning of that answer. It's impossible to divorce our identities or those of our students from our teaching, so it's always worth having in mind. Authentic representation of ourselves is really important in the classroom. And also, this from Jessie, I'm in a place where my identity can be a roadblock to rapport, so I focus on them. As much as we are comfortable sharing, for me, that's a lot, but I'm in the majority for most categories.
Yeah, so really, really thinking about how, while it is influencing how we teach and how we interact with our students, how it may not be something that we're actively thinking about while we're teaching, and why it's important to do so, because it does influence how not only we present the material, but also how our students interpret what it is that we're providing, the information that we're providing to them. And so a lot of times, especially the visible identities that we hold, we know heuristics, we all have them. We know everyone has these different biases or understanding of what different parts of identity mean. And so you come into the classroom and you have these visible identities. And so what does that mean if you're ignoring or not actively engaging in that process of how are these things impacting the environment in my classroom, then you're leaving a lot on the table that you should be being introspective about. And so when we think about these things, often when we're talking about how does identity impact our teaching, you hear commentary about, well, it's only relevant for certain types of courses. However, when we're thinking about even our research labs or our interactions with mentoring or our interactions with colleagues, identity is pervasive. It is always at play. And all of these spaces are becoming more and more diverse, right? And so a lot of you in the chat spoke about how sometimes you're not congruent, or there's not concordance between your identity and the identity of your students. And so making sure that you're attending to the changing landscape in academia, and you're being considerate of your personal social identities and how that influences how you can interact. And even thinking about how we can cue our students in that social categorization. And so are we exaggerating similarities or exaggerating differences? Are we highlighting or downplaying our identities? What are we doing, either consciously or subconsciously, that is really impacting how students are experiencing us in the classroom? And so are you really, you feel like visibly you're distant from your students? So are you spending a lot of time trying to build build some type of community in your classroom by really emphasizing what you feel like you may have in common with them? All right. And so also thinking about how you teach and how you mentor. And so thinking about how much of yourself and your identity is present in your courses, and even thinking through some of these different things that you may or may not have to think about while you're teaching. And so everyone has probably been exposed to Unpacking the Invisible Knapsack, but there's another list where there's Unpacking the Teacher's Invisible Knapsack, where she's talking specifically about social identity in higher education. And so thinking about whether or not you are experiencing a privilege where you can teach about certain types of content, whether it's race related or gender related or ability related, and you're allowed to not be perceived as having a particular self-interest in the material, right? And so me speaking or teaching a course on race would be different than someone who is not from a historically marginalized population teaching about that same thing, right? And how does that influence how my students are interacting with me or interpreting how I'm teaching the material? Also thinking about your course evaluations or your tenure and promotion packet, right? Are you able to say that it's not being influenced by your race, by your gender, by your sexuality, by your ability status? Is that something that you're thinking about? And are you sensitive to the fact that your colleagues might have that question in their mind when they're submitting or reviewing these things, right? Also thinking about whether or not people perceive you, how people are perceiving you in the classroom, and whether or not people are picking or sending students to you just because you fit a particular social identity, right? I remember I had a student sent to me who was a student who came from China, new to the US, and had mentioned to a professor that they were having trouble in the environment, right? And they're like, oh, you should go talk to Dr. Smith, right? But the only real reason either one of us could think of that the student was sent to me was because I am a person of color, right? Born in the US, I'm a Black woman, not Asian. So I don't have that insight to really have an additional information centered on what the student was asking for, right? It's just, oh, you both are people of color, you guys can figure it out, right? And being sensitive to the fact that just because people have some vague connection doesn't necessarily mean that you should send all of the students that fit into this category that you have now othered to the faculty member that you feel is also the other. And thinking about the perceptions that come into the classroom, right? That you come into the classroom with. And so whether or not you are perceived to be an expert on the topic or perceived to be an authority, right? I'm sure many of the women who are in here now have had an instance where they've had a student consistently call them Miss instead of Doctor, right? Um, no matter how gently or strict you correct, there's always that slip again, right? Whether or not you are again perceived to have that investment, whether or not you're perceived to have social privilege or marginalization. So if you have or if you belong to a historically underrepresented group, but it's not visibly noticeable, are students feeling like you're more privileged than you are, or your background is more privileged, and you may have some deeper experience but it's not visible. So and the students don't know, so they don't know to come to you to have these conversations about like their first gen status or something of that nature. And so we only have a few more minutes, but are there any particular questions or suggestions that anyone has that really can help us navigate these things for ourselves? And so I think when we talk about this, and you can drop it in the chat, we're often centered on how students are experiencing their identity, but we don't often think about ourselves and our colleagues in this larger context of identity.
Gabrielle, there's a statement earlier on, let me see if I can find it, that said, and I'm sorry, I'm blanking at the moment. Black and is it PIO? I know POC is person of color. Sorry, what's the I stand for?
Indigenous.
Thank you. That's what I thought. I wasn't sure. Okay, Black and Indigenous people of color faculty have so many service and mentoring expectations. So
yes,
that was the idea there. That
definitely, and a lot of time the labor is invisible labor, right? So labor that doesn't necessarily show up in meaningful ways in your CV or in your tenure and promotion packet, right? And so I remember I was recently, well, before COVID, was given a bigger office just because of the line of students that were outside of my door all the time during my office hours, and they were mostly like students of color, right? And at the time, I'm no longer the only Black faculty member in my department, but at the time I was. And so really thinking through, like, not even other faculty or colleagues sending students to you, but students seeking you out, right? And you don't want, students are often our why, so you don't want to turn them away. But then also committee commitments, right? Everyone wants their committees to be diverse, but if you have a low number of people of color on your faculty and staff, that means you are overexerting those people to have diverse committees. And so making sure that you're tempering this, so it's not just, oh yeah, let's call Dr. Smith because she will make our committee more diverse, but is this really in line with Dr. Smith's career goals? Is this something that she really needs to be on, and not just checking the box for diversity?
So we have a question from Carolyn that says, do you think it's a good idea to start our classes acknowledging our various privileges?
I think if you're comfortable, I think that can, you do it appropriately and you contextualize it for your students, that could be something that's good. I think if you're asking your students to confront their privileges in class, you should be willing to do some of that work as well. So I think whenever I give students a particular project that I know can be daunting for various reasons, a lot of them socially constructed ideas about how we communicate or what's appropriate to talk about, I use myself as an example. But I think we also have to acknowledge, like, I don't want you to feel like you have to say all of the identities that you hold, even if you're not completely comfortable, like outing yourself about a particular thing or something like that, but really allowing yourself to be a little bit more open with your students.
One of our colleagues posed this idea. If we have 5 more minutes, I wish we could have explored this idea more. Students often use their perceptions of us to decide what privilege we have.
Yes.
Yeah, I know we are short on time, but I'd love to put that out there and just see, Gabrielle, what you think.
Yeah, I definitely think that students often can use their perceptions, especially because we often don't share in the classroom, and so they make up these grand ideas about what we're actually experiencing. And so I remember when I first got this particular position, there was a rumor going around that I was like 23 and a savant and like all of these things, because the students were so concerned about my age, because I appear to be very, very young, that they just imagined all of these things. But then also, if you come in and your identities that you visibly present are ones that are typically associated with privilege, even if you don't have access to those privileges, you will be deemed as this privileged person. And we all know that being a professor is a privilege in and of itself. So the occupation, being in the classroom and being at the front of the classroom, already communicates that privilege and the particular social status. And so what other parts of your identity contribute to that? And I just saw in the chat, Dr. Brecky, that's the one who said, I was her former student. Hi, Dr. Brecky.
Jordan, do we have
Okay,
time
Bill.
for another question?
We are right at 2:00. If folks do need to vacate, feel free to do so, although I also won't obligate Gabrielle. But if you are interested and able to take one more, I think we have time for one more, maybe.
I have time.
All right, let's go with one more.
Jordan, do you want to pick, or are you good with me?
Let's see. Someone was asking about issues of region and sort of, I'm trying to remember, it was.
Yeah, the Houston area was more.
It's easier to talk about
yeah.
how those conversations on identities when you have more diversity.
Mm-hmm.
It's like Houston.
Yeah, definitely. And so I'm currently in DFW. I'm from Houston originally, the home of Beyonce, but I am currently in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. But yes, when there is a more diverse climate in your classroom where you have all of these different people, then it is easier. However, I have taught at institutions that are not as diverse. So my first job was at a historically Black college. And so all of the students were typically African American. And then I also, in my graduate institution, most of my students were white, but having these conversations in ways where even if you don't have someone in the classroom that people are reading as different, there are going to be differences even if they're not visible. And so even talking through some of those invisible types of identities that we may not even know that people hold in the classroom. I think we often talk about diversity and we say it broadly, but we really typically are only talking about 2 or 3 things. But there's so many different elements of diversity that we could be engaging in our classroom. And even if we're doing something that isn't a conversation that typically leads to controversy, I think expanding our students' interaction with just acknowledging and appreciating differences without ignoring them can lead to them being more open to some of these other identities as well.
Right. I want to stop us there. I say thank you so much to Gabrielle, verbally or in whatever way you wish. Yes, thank you so much. This is a terrific opportunity for reflection on our identities, our work, the things that we do. Thank you all so much. It was a pleasure seeing you all. I hope to see you in a future session, either our session this evening, tomorrow at lunchtime, or for a big chunk of the day on Saturday afternoon or morning, depending on where you are. Thank you all so much. It was a pleasure. Goodbye, everyone.
Yes.
Bye, Gabby.
Thank
Bye,
you, guys.
Gabrielle. Good to
Bye.
see you.